Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. This is your Akazaki Yahoo, and I start this broadcast as I would start any broadcast by first of all giving all praise, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua Hamashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Yisrael who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say shalom wa baruki. That is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High power, under one covenant. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
I'm joined this afternoon by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Shabbat Shalom, Aki.
Hey, Shabbat Shalom, Maki. Shabbat Shalom, Yasharal. All praises to the Most High for allowing us yet another set apart day.
Hallelujah. Yes, indeed. It is another Yom Shabbat, and praise to the Father for another Sabbath day. As we make preparation to not only enjoy this Sabbath, to also go into the Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, will begin this evening at evening, and the sun goes down, and we'll observe that into tomorrow. So, praise to the Father for another year. This is the next to the last feast of the year of the ordained feast. Of course, we do have Feast of Dedication that will take place in a couple of months, but this is the last of the Most High's ordained feast. This one, and then of course we have the Feast of Sukkot coming up. What is that next week?
Khan, that will be day 5, I believe. Yeah, Khan. Beginning at day 5. Yep.
Khan, yes, indeed. So, yes, we will enjoy these last few feasts and close out this calendar year of the Hebrew calendar and continue to edify the Most High and be edified in His truth and understanding. Praises to the Father. So,
hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Today, this Sabbath, we are taking a look at a video, of course, by some of our one of the fellas that does these videos. It's called the Black Journals, and this is the saddest story of black slavery you've ever heard. That's how he describes it. And this story was actually inspired the movie of Beloved. If you remember that movie, this is where that story came from. So after seeing it, we definitely had to share it with the people. And so let's get to it. Let me say this as well. I really hate our history has been so dim. We read the scriptures and we see a lot of our positive history there, but a lot of our negative history, especially since coming into this land, has very much been bleak. We've had some decent times, but the story of our restoration is really where we'll be edified. That's where things will really come together for us. So, with that being said, let's take a look at the saddest story you've ever heard. And I did put a link to the description of this video in the description box. So, check that out if you will. Here we go.
In pre-Civil War America, there are only very few slave stories, or perhaps none, that can be more compelling than Margaret Garner's. Here are the remarkable words of Levi Coffin, the abolitionist. Perhaps no case that came under my notice while engaged in aiding fugitive slaves attracted more attention and aroused deeper interest and sympathy than the case of Margaret Garner, the slave mother who killed her child rather than see it taken back to slavery. The frantic panic, the intensity, the inevitable "what am I going to do" syndrome, the "I wish I could just disappear" feeling, the tempestuous feeling of a terrible monster forcing its way right through your door. What would you do? These are the only ways the Margaret Garner story can be described. The story of Margaret Garner had advanced the rift between the abolitionists and the defenders of slavery, a rift that in effect led to the Civil War. Welcome to the interesting segment of today's video. Before we continue, kindly encourage us by hitting the like button in front of you. Share with your friends and subscribe to stay put for more interesting contents ahead. Do please stay with us on this one to the very end as we relate to you the ever-memorable Black narrative of the remarkable slave woman, Margaret Garner. Margaret, a.k.a. Peggy, a mulatto, was born on the 4th of June, 1834, a house slave to the Gaines family of Maplewood Plantation, Boone County, Kentucky. A house slave was a slave who worked and often lived in the house of the slave owner, performing domestic labor. House slaves performed essentially the same duties as all domestic workers throughout history, such as cooking, cleaning, serving meals, and caring for children. However, their slave status could expose them to more significant abuses, including physical punishments and use as a sexual slave. Working as a house slave for much of her...
I was just gonna say, give the listeners, Boone County is northern Kentucky. So, this was right by Cincinnati. It's maybe one county away from Cincinnati, away from Freedom. Freedom was right there across the river. But that was all I wanted to make right there.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't realize that. I'm not as familiar with this area as you have. I knew it was Kentucky. I thought, but
yeah. When we travel up to the brothers up in Israel now, Cincinnati, we pass through Boone County. It's when we make that turn on 71, that last turn, that's entering Boone County.
Oh wow. Okay. Yeah. Didn't realize that. So. Some interesting points that he bring out. He mentioned her name, which evades me at the moment. And also that she was a mulatto, which means she probably had her father was probably Caucasian.
Mm-hmm. And I want to say that they mentioned that in this. I believe.
Yeah. So, let's continue here.
Life. Margaret often traveled with her masters and even accompanied them on shopping trips to free territories in Cincinnati, Ohio. Given the situation, there's no telling the humiliating experience Margaret must have been through growing up as a house slave. She may have been the daughter of the plantation owner, John Pollard Gaines. Why? This is usually as female slaves are rampantly raped by their owners, who at the end of the day become pregnant, turning mothers in the process. Rape was a legitimate act in the era, raping black female or male slaves to be specific, so it's not like there was anything anybody could do about it. It was some horrible fate black slaves couldn't help embracing to live on at the time. That apparently was what happened to Margaret's mother, a black female slave. That explains Margaret's mulatto status.
Yeah, so most likely that's the situation, that she was, her mother was defiled by the heathen slave master, and she's stemmed from that.
Mm-hmm.
She would be his seed, and he abusing his own child. I mean, that's
sick. It's sick. It's sick. And against Torah.
Exactly.
What was I getting ready to say? But yeah, oftentimes what would happen, you would see other pregnant captives along with the master's wife, in order for this master's wife to have and I shouldn't even say master's wife, this woman, Gentile woman, where she would have a nursemaid to nurse her child. So this was very common.
Right. Exactly. So let's continue here.
John Pollard Gaines, Margaret's supposed father, was a U.S. military and political figure. He was a Whig member of the United States House of Representatives, representing Kentucky from the year 1847 to the year 1849, and he served as governor of the Oregon Territory from the year 1850 to the year 1853, stepping down after a turbulent term in office. He was the owner of Margaret Garner, whose enslavement and sexual assault is the basis for Toni Morrison's prize-winning novel, Beloved. In the year 1849, Margaret got married to Robert Garner, an enslaved man. That was how she took up the name Margaret Garner. In the late of that same year, December to be specific, the plantation and all the people enslaved therein were sold to John Pollard Gaines's younger brother, Archibald K. Gaines. The Garner's first child, Thomas, was born early in 1850. Three of Garner's younger children, Samuel, Mary, and Priscilla, described as mulattoes, were born each 5 to 7 months after a child born to Archibald Gaines and his wife. These light-skinned children were likely the children of Archibald Gaines, the only adult white male at Maplewood. The timing of the pregnancies suggests that the children were each conceived after Gaines's wife had become pregnant and was sexually unavailable to him. The winter of 1856 was a particularly harsh one, harsh enough that the Ohio River froze solid in January, something that only happened every few years. When it did happen, slaves on the Kentucky side of the river would take the opportunity to make their break for freedom across the solid ice. This particular break happened in the latter part of January, the 28th, 1856. A party of 17 belonging to different masters in the same neighborhood made arrangements to escape together. There was snow on the ground and the roads were smooth, so the plan of going to the river on a sled naturally suggested itself. The time fixed for their flight was Sabbath night, and having managed to get a large sled and 2 good horses belonging to one of their masters.
Ironically, he mentioned he's called it Sabbath night.
Mm-hmm. And I remember I'm wondering, were they considering first day of the week like the Sabbath, or whether, because here's the thing, a lot of the plantation owners were of the Jewish faith, and we know that they were keeping the Sabbath. So was this a situation in this case? I'm not certain, but I remember in the script Mashiach saying, pray that your journey is not during the Sabbath, so that's what stuck out in my mind when I heard that.
Yeah, and I'm thinking that's probably how it was written in that book, which I haven't read. I don't even have seen a copy of it outside of this video, but I'm thinking it's mentioned like that in the book, and that's probably why he mentioned it that way. I don't recall that. Well, if I went back and watched the movie, I wonder if that's what it would be depicted as Sabbath night. And so let's continue here.
The party of 17 crowded into the sled and started on their hazardous journey in the latter part of the night. Robert Garner and his wife, Margaret Garner, who was at the time pregnant, together with family members, along with several other enslaved families, had just escaped and were on their way out and running towards just anywhere now. It doesn't have to be a familiar destination. It only has to be a slave-free zone. Robert, with the aid of his cohorts, had not only stolen his enslavers' horses and sleigh, but also his gun. This was about survival. They were going to need it. They drove the horses at full speed, and at daylight reached the river below Covington, opposite Wester Row. They left the sled and horses there, and as quickly as possible crossed the river on foot. It was now broad daylight, and people were beginning to pass about the streets. The fugitives therefore applied the caution of dividing their company so that they might not attract so much notice. The 17 of them had come to an instant resolve to split. Margaret's father and mother-in-law, Simon and Mary, who were also part of the escapees along with the rest of the family, made their way to the house of a man named Elijah Kite, known to be a relative of Margaret's, but whose freedom has been purchased. They had to make several inquiries in order to find Kite's house, which was below Mill Creek, in the lower part of the city. This, however, may have led to their discovery afterwards, as they had apparently been seen by a number of persons on their way to Kite's, and could have been easily traced by pursuers. The other 9 fugitives were more fortunate. They had made their way uptown and found friends who conducted them to safe hiding places where they remained until night. They were put on the Underground Railroad and went safely through to Canada. Kite had quickly gone to Levi Coffin for urgent counsel on how to get the group to safety. Coffin had agreed to help them escape the city and told Kite to take the Garner group further west of the city where many free blacks lived, and they were to wait there until nightfall. Levi Coffin, from October 28, 1798 to September 16, 1877, is a personality we all must know for a second. Coffin was an American abolitionist and prominent conductor of the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad was a network of secret routes and safe houses used by enslaved African Americans to escape to freedom in the northern states or Canada during the 19th century. Coffin was born in North Carolina and raised in a Quaker family with strong anti-slavery beliefs. In 1826, he and his wife, Catherine White, moved to Newport, now Fountain City, Indiana, where they opened a general store. The Coffins became actively involved in assisting fugitive slaves and worked tirelessly to aid their escape to freedom. Levi.
I wonder. So was Indiana in that same setup?
Indiana was a free state as well. Here locally, the next county over from us here in Jeffersonville is Floyd County. So Floyd County was on the Underground Railroad station as well, New Albany.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. No, I didn't realize that.
Yep.
Good information. Let's continue here.
Levi Coffin's home in Newport became known as the Grand Central Station of the Underground Railroad because of its crucial role in helping numerous slaves reach safety. The house was often filled with escaping slaves seeking shelter, food, and assistance on their journey northward. Coffin used his store as a front to conceal his activities and maintained a discreet but efficient system to protect the freedom seekers. Levi Coffin's dedication to the abolitionist cause and his instrumental role in aiding escaping slaves earned him the nickname President of the Underground Railroad. His legacy as an ardent anti-slavery activist and a conductor on the Underground Railroad remains an essential part of American history. This was the man that Elijah Kite had urgently gone to meet to plan his friend's escape. A few reasonable minutes had quite passed after Kite stepped out of the house. No sooner had the fugitives realized that they had been made out and were already surrounded by pursuers whose furious voices they could now hear telling them to own up. They couldn't believe their ears. They ran into frantic panic, short of just anything to do. They had found the Garners barricaded inside Kite's house. Slave catchers, some U.S. Marshals, the master of the fugitives with a posse of men. The door and windows were barred, and those inside refused to give admittance. The fugitives were determined to fight and to die rather than to be taken back to slavery. Margaret, at this point in time, had run amok, pacing from wall to wall, the mother of 4 children who was also heavy at the time. She then declared menacingly that she would kill herself and her children before she would return to bondage. It was clear she meant it. This was more or less a vow. The slave men were armed. They gathered courage and decided that even if it was death, they would not die without a fight. The window was first battered down with a stick of wood, and one of the deputy marshals attempted to enter, but a pistol shot from within by Robert Garner made a flesh wound on his arm and caused him to abandon the attempt. But the pursuers were not going to abort the mission. The gunshots from inside was not going to deter them. They had begun battering down the door with some timber and rushed in. Robert had fired several more shots and wounded one of the officers, but was soon overpowered and dragged out of the house. At this moment, Margaret Garner, her eyes dirtied with the futility of hope and impossibility of freedom, dared to fulfill her word. She had picked up a shovel and with it struck 2 of her children on the head, and they fell blank. Margaret wasn't done yet. In the wink of an eye, she had seized a butcher knife that lay on the table, and with one stroke had slit the throat of her little daughter, Mary, whom she probably loved the best. A heart-wrenching choice. But a mother had to do it. Mary was 2.5 years old at the time of her sudden death. She then attempted to take the life of the other children who were already wounded and to kill herself, but was overpowered and held bound by the pursuers who had just stepped in before she could finish off her thought. The whole party was then arrested and lodged in jail.
Wow. Let that settle in for just a brief moment. I mean, think about a mother hitting her children over the head with a shovel, to free them from this life and the reality that they lived in.
Mm-hmm.
Like that is a harsh. That's extreme. That's extreme. So that just kind of tells you the situation that they were in. Like life was so rough for this lady that she was like, it's not even worth living. And that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's unthinkable. You know what I mean? Like, but this is the life that she lived, and she felt like there was more liberty in death than to be alive. What did this sister seen?
Right.
What has she been put through? You know?
That's the thing. That's the thing of it. What has she been through that she was like, my children not doing this? You know what I'm saying? I'm gonna set my children free. Like, this is the freedom of my children. Death. It's better for us to die than to live like this. And is ironically, it was mentioned that way in Black Panther when Killmonger said, "Just throw me in the ocean with the ancestors that jumped from the slave ship who would rather die than go into bondage."
There were some Igbo brothers back in the slave period.
Mm-hmm.
They walked into the ocean from their plantation, knowing that their thought was that they would be reunited with their homeland on the other side of that death.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed, and you know, it's been a lot of conversation, a lot of speculation about those situations, and we can see those in in the scripture. We see what happened with Samson. Samson prayed to the Most High to give him strength that he may pass on with the Philistines that he was killing. He was killing them at his death. And the Most High gave him the ability to do that. As he went from being a regular man back to having the spirit of the Most High with him. And in doing so, he took his own life. So, there's a lot of questions. All my life, I've been told that, you can't forgive yourself. You can't be forgiven for something if you kill yourself. Or you can't be forgiven for killing yourself, because how you going to repent? You know what I'm saying? That's so I don't know. I certainly wouldn't tempt the Most High in that manner, given this situation. I think I would say this: if you're faced with death, meaning that you're gonna die, and as a man in the position of a warrior, of a man in battle, however you want to describe it, I think your obligation is to accomplish all you can accomplish before that time comes, even if that time is short. Accomplish all that you can accomplish. Do everything you can do up until that time.
Mm-hmm.
So take that how you want. I'll leave it there. Let's continue.
The party remained in jail for almost a month while the legal dispute continued. The Margaret Garner affair had raised serious attention both nationwide and international. The jail was kept busy all the while, with visitors trooping in and out to offer their sympathies. According to Levi Coffin, those who came to speak words of comfort and cheer felt them die upon their lips when they looked into Mrs. Garner's face and marked the unspeakable expression of agony. Her sorrow was beyond the reach of any words of encouragement and consolation, and can be realized in all its fullness only by those who have tasted of a cup equally bitter. Visitors noticed 2 old scars on Margaret's face, but when asked about them, she would only reply, "White man struck me." Others noticed the light complexion of her children and speculated that it was evidence of sexual abuse at the hands of her owner. One of the visitors who tried to console Margaret was Lucy Stone, a remarkably vocal anti-slavery activist who returned to her new home in Cincinnati after completing her speaking tour. While Stone met with Margaret, a rumor started that Stone had attempted to procure a knife for Margaret so she could finish the job if the trial went against her. The slaveholder's attorney, Colonel Chambers, openly accused Stone of this in court. When Stone heard about the accusation, she asked to be allowed to address the court after it adjourned for the day. At that time, speaking with her natural eloquence, Lucy Stone Blackwell, as the court called her, made the following statement to a packed courtroom. "I am only sorry that I was not in when Colonel Chambers said what he did about me and my giving a knife to Margaret. When I saw that poor fugitive took her toil-hardened hand in mine and read in her face deep suffering and an ardent longing for freedom, I could not help bid her be of good cheer. I told her that 1,000 hearts were aching for her, and that they were glad one child of hers was safe with the angels. Her only reply was a look of deep despair, of anguish such as no words can speak. I thought the spirit she manifested was the same as that of our ancestors to whom we had erected the monument at Bunker Hill, the spirit that would rather let us all go back to God than back to slavery. The faded faces of the Negro children tell too plainly to what degradation female slaves must submit. Rather than give her little daughter to that life, she killed it. If in her deep maternal love she felt the impulse to send her child back to God, to save it from coming woe, who shall say she had no right to do so? That desire had its root in the deepest and holiest feelings of our nature, implanted alike in black and white by our common Father. With my own teeth I would tear open my veins and let the earth drink my blood, rather than to wear the chains of slavery. How then could I blame her for wishing her child to find freedom with God and the angels where no chains are? I know not whether this commissioner has children, else I would appeal to him to know how he would feel to have them torn from him. But I feel that he will not disregard the book which says, "Thou shalt not deliver unto his master the servant which is escaped from his master unto thee. He shall dwell with thee, even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best."
She went to the Torah on him.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, that is because if what if all our ancestors would have did that? You know what I'm saying? We wouldn't be here.
Hey, Khan, and what I was thinking about, what if Yosef had done the same thing, taken his life?
Yeah.
None of us would be here. Yasharal wouldn't have been saved from the famine that had taken over the land.
Exactly.
But at the end of the day, I can't really question this woman's actions, because we just heard that she, was probably being raped. She was being beat. She was living through such suffering. You know what I mean? So I won't be the one to condemn this woman.
No,
And the Father says in his word that he will show mercy on who he shows mercy on. Now, how is it that the Father allowed her to kill her own child? We also heard in this that the country was almost in outrage over what had happened. So this brought light to the whole institution of slavery. And I say institution, the barbaric institution of slavery here. So I can kind of see the Father moving in that as well.
Yeah, exactly.
And we know that blood makes an atonement, blood makes a sacrifice.
Right.
And I don't have the answers. I don't have the answers. I'm just trying to reason in my mind, like, what's going on,
Exactly. No, I feel you on this. I know this would be a difficult one, but man, it would definitely provoke so much thought and so much insight. And we tend to have, a lot of our people have gotten away from the understanding of how we came to be and how we got to this place. I'm not going to even get into the fact that if this lady was a mulatto, and her father being possibly a slave master, what that means, what that entails, because that's not important here, because that's not what she was dealing with. She wasn't dealt with as a son of a slave master, as a daughter of a slave master. She was dealt with as a slave.
Right.
And so, this is what the reality, that there was be no difference between any of us and her if we were in that time frame. So, yeah. So let's continue here.
There was another visitor of note who also came to see Mrs. Garner and had some memorable conversation with her. P.S. Bassett, the American Baptist. Bassett chronicles meeting with Margaret and her mother-in-law just 2 weeks following the event, and was able to have some word. Here's an account of his. Last Sabbath, after preaching in the city prison, Cincinnati, through the kindness of the deputy sheriff, I was permitted to visit the apartment of that unfortunate woman, concerning whom there has been much excitement during the last 2 weeks. I found her with an infant in her arms only a few months old, and observed that it had a large bunch on its forehead. I inquired about the cause of the injury. She then proceeded to give a detailed account of her attempt to kill her children. She said that when the officers and slaveholders came to the house in which they were concealed, She caught a shovel and struck 2 of her children on the head, and then took a knife and cut the throat of the third and tried to kill the other. That if they had given her time, she would have killed them all. That with regard to herself, she cared but little, but she was unwilling to have her children suffer as she had done. I inquired if she was not excited almost to madness when she committed the act. No, she replied. I was as cool as I am now, and would much rather kill them at once and thus end their sufferings than have them taken back to slavery and be murdered by piecemeal. The 2 men, he meant to say Robert Garner, Margaret's husband, and Simon Garner, her father-in-law, and the 2 other children were in another apartment, but her mother-in-law was in the same room. She says she is the mother of 8 children, most of whom have been separated from her, that her husband was once separated from her 25 years, during which time she did not see him, that could she have prevented it, she would never have permitted him to return, as she did not wish him to witness her sufferings, or be exposed to the brutal treatment he would receive. She states that she has been a faithful servant, and in her old age she would not have attempted to obtain her liberty, but as she became feeble and less capable of performing labor, her master became more and more exacting and brutal in his treatment, until she could stand it no longer.
Wow.
That the effort could result only in death at most. She therefore made the attempt. She witnessed the killing of the child, but said she neither encouraged nor discouraged her daughter-in-law, for if under similar circumstances, she should probably have done the same. The old woman is from 60 to 70 years of age, has been a professor of religion about 20 years, and speaks with much feeling of the time she shall be delivered from the power of the oppressor, and dwell with the Savior, where the wicked cease from troubling, and the weary are at rest.
Yeah, so that confirms it. Yeah, she was definitely brutalized, and not just sexually, but physically, just beaten and because she was an older person and couldn't do what she used to do. And whew, man, that is a harsh reality. That's a harsh existence. And to think about that and all her history, and like now she has these children here, and would she want them to experience that same situation that she had experienced? Like, you think about that as far as your children. Like, I know for my children, I want much better than what I had. And to think about them being in a situation where they don't even have there's no hope of anything better. They're going to follow directly in your footsteps, and everything you've done has been not good. Your situation has been not good. So, yeah, I can see how that could be, a harsh situation, and even to a point where you go, I'm not going to have these children. These children got to go. And I don't know if I could mentally, in this place that I am now, I couldn't say that I could mentally get myself to that with my own children. I think it'd be more feasible for me to try to get his children, get rid of them, and let my children have it better. I think that'll be the ideal situation. So,
and perhaps again, I can't question her actions. I know that I'm hearing about what she had gone through.
mm-hmm.
I'm thinking about what she had seen,
Right.
but perhaps if she would have took that knife to those people trying to put her back in bondage,
exactly.
They would have killed her, right? But what would it have done for her children to see this happen?
Exactly.
They would have been forever an enemy to these people, and would have continued fighting in the struggle. But this is all hindsight is 2020.
Right.
And I won't condemn this woman for her actions, man.
Exactly.
I mean, is it right? Like, no, it's not. But it wasn't right what she had gone through.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I agree wholeheartedly. And I think we just a different breed. Of course, I don't. I imagine the hopelessness that she had to have to say, "My children I got to free my children." Like, she wasn't saying, "I got to kill my children." She was saying, "I got to free my children. This is the only way my children are going to be free."
Mm-hmm.
That was her logic. Our logic is, well, we got to do it a different way.
Yeah.
So if I got to go, then yeah, it's going to be what it is. So, yeah, let's continue here. The trial.
The subsequent trial lasted for 2 weeks, after which the judge deliberated another 2 weeks. It was the longest and most complicated case of its kind. A typical fugitive slave hearing would have lasted less than a day. The core issue was whether the Garners would be tried as persons and charged with the murder of their daughter, or tried as property under the fugitive slave law. The defense attorney argued that Ohio's right to protect its citizens should take precedence. The slave catchers and owner argued for the precedence of federal law over the state. During the trial, Margaret and her husband were represented by prominent abolitionist lawyers, including John Jolliffe and Cassius M. Clay, and Lucy Stone, a remarkably vocal anti-slavery activist. The defense argued that Margaret's actions were a direct result of the inhumane institution of slavery, where enslaved individuals had no control over their lives or the well-being of their loved ones. The defense attempted to prove that Margaret Garner had been liberated under a former law covering slaves taken into free states for other work. Her attorney proposed that she be charged with murder so that the case would be tried in a free state, understanding that the governor would later pardon her. The prosecuting attorney argued that the federal fugitive slave law took precedence over state murder charges. Over 1,000 people turned out each day to watch the proceedings, lining the streets outside the courthouse. 500 men were deputized to maintain order in the town. The presiding judge, Pendery, ruled that federal fugitive warrants had supervening authority. Defense attorney John Jolliffe then tried a strategy of arguing that the Fugitive Slave Act violated the guarantee of religious freedom by compelling citizens to participate in evil by returning slaves. Pendery rejected this argument. On the closing day of the trial, the anti-slavery activist Lucy Stone took the stand to defend her earlier conversations with Margaret, about whom the prosecution had complained. She spoke about the interracial sexual relationship that underlay part of the case. Margaret Garner's actions were driven by her master's abuse and the well-known abuse slaves faced nationwide. Women were known to practice infanticide to alleviate the burden of slavery from their children. However, in Garner's case, her children faced even more opposition due to their being mulattoes. Mulattoes were seen as a threat as well as a disgrace among the plantation and white families, because the birth of mulatto children highlighted infidelity within the slave-owning families. They reminded the family of a perceived sin and were often beaten or sold. Garner underwent drastic measures to protect her child not only from the cruelty of the institution of slavery, but from the double threat due to the child's mulatto status. But in spite of touching appeals, of eloquent pleadings, the commissioner remanded the fugitives back to slavery. He said that it was not a question of feeling to be decided by the chance current of his sympathies. The law of Kentucky and the United States made it a question of property. Margaret Garner was therefore not immediately tried for murder, but was forced to return to a slave state along with Robert and their youngest child, a daughter of about 9 months old. When Ohio authorities got an extradition warrant for Garner to try her for murder, they were unable to find her for the arrest. Gaines, her owner, kept moving her between cities in Kentucky. Ohio officials missed finding Margaret in Covington by a few hours, missed apprehending her again in Frankfort, and finally caught up with her enslaver in Louisville, only to discover that he had put the enslaved people on a boat headed for his brother's plantation in Arkansas. The Liberator reported that on the 6th of March, 1856, the steamboat Henry Lewis, on which the Garners were being transported, began to sink after colliding with another boat. Margaret Garner and her baby daughter were either thrown overboard during the collision, or, according to an alternate account, Garner deliberately jumped overboard after tossing her baby into the river. The baby drowned. It was reported that Margaret expressed frantic joy that her baby had died, and that she had tried to drown herself. She and Robert were kept in Arkansas only a short time before being sent to Gaines's family friends in New Orleans as a household servant. The Garners then disappeared from sight. In 1870, a reporter from the Cincinnati Chronicle found Robert Garner and gathered more about his life. Robert and Margaret Garner had worked in New Orleans, and in 1857 were sold to Judge DeWitt Clinton Bonham for plantation labor at Tennessee Landing, Mississippi. Robert said Margaret had died in 1858 of typhoid fever in an epidemic in the valley. He said that before she died, Margaret urged him to never marry again in slavery, but to live in hope of freedom. Margaret Garner's tragic story continues to be remembered as a symbol of the harsh realities of slavery and the lengths to which enslaved individuals were willing to go to gain their freedom. The uniqueness of the event has raised significant attention over the years, inspiring numerous writings and artistry. A notable example amongst them is the Pulitzer Prize award-winning novel, Beloved, 1987, by Toni Morrison, and its subsequent adaptation into a film of the same name starring Oprah Winfrey in 1998. As we bid farewell to this compelling tale, let us take to heart its lessons, vowing to create a world where freedom and dignity are the birthright of all. For in the legacy of Margaret Garner, we find the strength to face the past with honesty, to confront the present with courage, and to shape the future with love and understanding. Don't forget to support our efforts by liking, sharing.
Con. Wow, that is very deep, and very deep story, very deep situation, and my gracious. So, uh, yeah, well, I'm almost at a loss for words, but let me reiterate the reason I wanted to highlight this particular video is because a lot of our people at this day and time here in 2023, uh, they don't think about these things. You know, it used to be that, you know, we would see movies on television that highlighted, you know, the history, the slavery of the so-called black people, and then we started seeing brothers on the corners, you know, teaching that the enslaved people were the people of the Most High,
Mm-hmm.
and that the Messiah was coming to bring liberty to our people, and that we would be restored to where it is that we're supposed to be. And it seems like right along the time that really started taking off, they stopped talking about slavery. That they took away those movies and stopped highlighting those points because, well, and I know there's some still out there, but I mean, it used to be on like regular TV, especially in the second month of the year on the Gregorian calendar. You know, you see Roots. They did have that new Roots, but ironically, it's not running like it was before. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's a coincidence that that's the case, because me understanding that, seeing that from my youth, and having that in my mind, made understanding the curses that much easier. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I'm thinking that's why that they've taken that away, and so that's why we highlight these historical points to understand the history of the so-called black man, woman, and child enslaved in America and in other places, because we need to understand who we are and why these things happen to us. As a young man, I often would think, you know, why. I understand that my people come from slaves, and you know this was the situation that we were in. But why was this my people? Why were these other people not slaves? Why were my people slaves? Well, I didn't have an answer back then, but when I came into knowledge and in my adulthood, it answered the question. It made me understand why we were slaves, because we disobeyed our power, and he took his power away from us and left us subjective to our adversaries, our enemies, and they came and put us in bondage. That is the continual theme that we find in the scriptures. So, uh, yeah. So that's it on final thoughts. Go ahead, Doc.
Khan, I land backing on you on the disappearance of a lot of these movies from TV. You know, there's a big debate going on in the country on critical race theory,
Mhm.
and you know, many don't want it taught in schools. They don't want the truth taught in schools. You know, I'm glad we highlighted this. You know, it's I work over in Kentucky. You know, have lived lived there the majority of my life. You know, it is and the people can do their own research with this, but this was the Bible Belt, so called. It was also a gateway for our people's liberty and freedom. That river, that Ohio River, being a barrier that our people would have to cross over, and once they were able to cross over, a lot of times they would be free there. So what you ended up having was the plantation owners would employ uh, people from Kentucky to recapture the captives and bring them back. This was big business, and a big ordeal. And the fact that you would even have these men that were employed to recapture, they would infiltrate the Quakers, and the Quakers were real instrumental in the underground slave trade, and because they didn't agree with slavery. But at one point you had some of these uh, uh, people that were employed to round up the captives. They had infiltrated the Quakers and blown up the whole operation. So this was big business, and people might wonder, like, why are we always talking about stuff like this? But you all need to know, because the scriptures I read, it tells me that the Father he's gonna send his Son soon, and he's gonna shake this world up.
Right.
But why? And the reason why is, can you consider yourself to be blessed from the Most High when you are oppressing his people?
Right.
And the question to that, the answer to that is no.
Absolutely.
You can consider yourself a Bible thumper, consider yourself a Christian, but if you are oppressing the Father's children, you're none of his. I've got a couple of scripts, because this situation is a testament against these people, man. All right, but this is coming from the book of Ephesians, knowing that Shaul was writing this epistle, this letter to these Ephesians. These words that Shaul is speaking is coming from the Most High. But look what he tells these Gentiles. He says, "And ye masters, do the same unto them, forbearing threatening, knowing that your master also in Shemaim, neither there is a respect of persons with him." Another one, masters, give unto your servants that which is just and equal, knowing that ye also have a master in Shemaim. Now, this sister that we were covering today, she was fleeing. Was she fleeing because she was being treated equal? No, she had gone through, man, a terrible. I can't really even put it into words like what she has gone through, and she's not alone.
Right.
She's not alone in that. I'm bringing this out to you Gentiles for you all to understand on what is coming. There has to be an atonement, and if you are continuing to oppress the people, you're none of his. If you have profited off the labor of his people, you're none of his. So understand why this calamity is coming upon us, and I don't have to ask the Father to have his judgment be righteous. That's what he's coming with.
Right.
But man, I could go on for days about this. But for our people, need to come back to the Most High in spirit and in truth, because what's coming isn't meant for you.
Right.
And for the Gentiles, you need to atone. There is no atonement without admitting the injustice. There is no atonement if the same injustice continues. There is no atonement if you continue. Right now you got Europeans upset with Niger over in West Africa, because they are saying you all are no longer going to rape and pillage our resources. We want control over this, and these Europeans are upset about our people saying this.
Exactly.
This is madness, huh?
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
I digress, man.
Nah, I got you, Ryan. I got you. All praise to the Father. This I knew this would be a sensitive topic, but it was very necessary to be brought to light, because This is a reality. This is a reality. This is a historical reality that our people dealt with. And um, yeah, so with that, we're going to go ahead and close this one out and make ready for our lesson for the day. We'll close out with the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Once again, the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter number 12 and verse number 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear the Most High and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. At the end of the day, when it's all said and done, and all the dust is settled and all the smoke is cleared, we will be judged on whether we feared the Most High and kept his commandments. Why? Because this is the reason that we are here. I am your Akazaki Yahoo, joined by my most esteemed Akinanaya. Give all praise, honor, and great esteem unto the Most High Power, Yahuwah, Bahashem, Yahushua HaMashiach, and to the 12 tribes of Israel who are scattered to the four quarters of the earth. I say Shalom Wabarukim, that is peace and blessings. And I cannot wait to the day that the Most High brings us back together and we are once again 12 tribes, one family, one nation, under the Most High Power, under one covenant. Until that day, Shabbat Shalom, family.
Shabbat shalom, Mr. Paka.
Hallelujah. Praise you, Abba Yah.